So I'm happy to share with you the latest developments that we have in our redistricting and reconfiguration plan. And this is on the heels of about 3 years worth of work. I want to give recognition to our redistricting committee and the work that they did, which led to a recommendation in June. And to recap that recommendation in June, at that time, the board asked us to go back and explore a few other options. And we did that work this summer. That led to us giving an update to the Board of Education on October 7th. On October 7th, we presented the redistricting and long-range facilities plan at the October 7th board meeting. And following that presentation, starting on October 8th through October 31st, we engaged in a public comment period where the public could give feedback regarding the details of that plan. And I'm going to share an overview of the feedback that we received. We had really high engagement. In this day and age, we get a number of surveys, and certainly through redistricting, this was our 5th survey that we sent out to families asking for feedback. And we had 958 participants that engaged in that thought exchange. So I'd like to summarize some of the feedback that we received and then present to you revised recommendations that are based on that feedback. So just to recap, this is what our community and residents were giving feedback on. On October 7th, we had made a recommendation for a long-range plan for not only solving our building capacity issues, but also a long-range plan that really looked at how we want to use our facilities in the best way for the long term and for our future. So we could have just looked at this in a more simplistic way of redistricting, which would be moving students from one school to another school. And that may have solved the issues of capacity in overcrowding that we have at some of our schools. But we wanted to do this in a much more thorough and complex and comprehensive way. And to do so, we wanted to look at what is our future plans for the use of the Ebenezer building, where some of our district offices are located, yet we get no state aid back on any of the work that needs to be done at the Ebenezer building. And that building does need substantial work to be done if we are going to maintain that building and keep that building either used by students or used by our employees. In addition, we have the Winchester Academy that's been leased by BOCES. BOCES intends to vacate much of their programming by the fall of 27 when they move into their new facility. So we need a long-range plan for the future of the Winchester Academy. We also have needs in our transportation department with a landlocked transportation facility that is really keeping us hamstrung on our desire to expand our fleet of buses. We currently have 28 buses that are contracted by a bus contracting service. And if we wanted to expand our fleet of buses, we're going to need a bigger footprint to do so. And then lastly, there's been discussion around the use of our high schools and whether or not we should have our academy model the way the academy model is, or should we look at using our high schools in a different way, given consideration to things like specialized schools or magnet schools. So in order for us to do this right and to do this well, we believed that it was much more important for us to look at this not just as redistricting and solving elementary or middle school capacity issues, but really looking at a comprehensive way for how do we best want to use our buildings long term and for the future. So we presented that on October 7th, and as I mentioned, we then engaged in a public comment period where the public could give feedback. I'd like to summarize that feedback for you now. As I said, we had 958 participants who responded to the survey. The vast majority of the respondents were parents or family members of our students. Second was our faculty and staff members here in the school. And then community members or students who gave feedback. We asked participants in that survey what their building affiliation is, what schools do they have a child or children attending, and this is the breakdown of the representation of those that completed the survey. The next question asked, have you viewed the long-range redistricting and facilities presentation, which was the October 7th meeting. I appreciate the honesty, but we had 14% of people who gave us their opinion despite having seen the most recent and revised plan on October 7th. And some of the comments were indicative of that. There were comments and feedback made regarding plans that had been eliminated from consideration going back to June. So I know this is a lot of information and maybe parents weren't keeping up on it every step of the way, but nonetheless, we had 86% of the participants did make an educated opinion before weighing in on this. They did either watch the board meeting live or watch a recording of it so that they could share their opinion as to what we were presenting. The stakeholder feedback, I would really like to, I think, just pause and commend our board for the time that they spent in allowing us to go back and revisit some of these plans, because the feedback from our community is really overall quite positive. When you talk about something that's a controversial topic like redistricting, to have more than half of your participants in a survey think that you're going about this the right way is pretty telling. And so this particular question asked, do you believe that the district has developed a plan that will solve capacity issues at Clinton and Allendale? And of the respondents, 61% agreed or strongly agreed, with an additional 20% kind of feeling neutral, with only 16% either disagreeing or strongly disagreeing. And again, when you're talking about a controversial topic like redistricting, to have the vast majority of the feedback be positive is pretty overwhelming. Additionally, this question, I believe the district has been responsive to feedback shared by stakeholders. Again, the vast majority believing that we have been responsive. And I think if you've been following this along the way, you will see that the plan that was presented in June versus what was presented on October 7th versus the update that I'm going to give tonight shows that there has been refinement and tweaks along the way based on the feedback that we're getting from stakeholders. The next question, I believe the district has created a long-range plan for future use of school buildings and facilities. Here, 59% positively weighing in with their feedback. This next summary took all of the comments from our participants, and it was the ability to analyze those comments as to, are there emerging themes through the comments, things that were trends in what people were sharing as feedback. And on one side of the issue, some of the feedback is that there is a belief that elementary base redistricting would solve the capacity issues. But on the other side of the issue was a loud and strong voice of participants who said, yes, we believe it would solve the capacity issues. However, the preference would be to go directly to that long-range plan, not to start with elementary base redistricting and then move to the pre-K to 2, 3 to 5 model, but rather advocacy to move directly to that greater long-range plan of the pre-K to 2, 3 to 5 model. And what both sides can agree on is the need for a long-term solution, that we have in the past been riddled with what's been perceived to be short-term solutions and short-term fixes, and what both sides can agree upon is that there is a desire to have a long-term plan that makes sense for our district. Some other themes that emerged were themes around the timing of this. I'll underscore again that there is definitely a desire for us to make a decision and to take action, that this has been studied for about 3 years now, and that now is the time to do something decisive and to take action. There's also some feedback that we received regarding the timing as it relates, I would say, to students having multiple moves throughout their elementary experience. In one of the models, which would be elementary-based redistricting, then going to our long-term plan, there may be some students who would be in one school, say for kindergarten and first grade, potentially go to a different school for second grade, and then go to a school for grades 3 through 5. And there was concern that was expressed on that, the number of moves that a child may need to make during their elementary years. And that was really underscored by a theme of student stability, that if we can solve this with making the fewest student moves possible, that was preferred. And also keeping students together with their peers, rather than peeling out a small group of students to go from school A to school B. If there's a way to keep large cohorts of students together, such as a reconfiguring model, was preferred so that students would have that stability to move with their peers and stay with their peer groups. And then lastly, some emerging themes were simply general support. There was a lot of positive comments that people appreciated that from June, we went back to the drawing board this summer. We came out on October 7th and then further sought feedback. People appreciated that it wasn't just a few people in a room making a decision, but that there's been transparency throughout the process and that we've sought feedback and have really listened to that feedback to influence our final recommendations. There's also an overwhelming sense that there was positive sentiments that people do trust the district's decision-making process and a willingness to proceed with a recommended plan. So based on that feedback, the Board of Education and I had a work session on October 21st. While the feedback was not yet closed, we were able to get a sense of some of the preliminary feedback, and then I'm sharing with you the final feedback after the public comment period closed on October 31st. So with that, we have some revised recommendations that I'll be presenting to the Board of Education and for us to consider as our long-term plan to move forward together. So to recap, this is what was presented on October 7th, which was referred to as Phase 1 elementary base redistricting, which moved some students from Clinton Elementary to Northwood and some students from Allendale to Winchester Potters or West Elementary, with then the long-term plan of reconfiguring our elementary schools with pre-K to 2, 3 to 5 designations based on the schools. What I'll also note here that I failed to mention earlier is that the solution for West Middle School would be to fill in the pool and utilize that new space as instructional space, where we anticipate 3 to 4 classrooms of additional classrooms, which would tremendously have a positive impact on the capacity issues at West Middle School. So this is what was presented on October 7th. Based on the feedback, we have revised the plan. Some of the elements, certainly will be the same, you'll see, but we are eliminating that step of elementary base redistricting based on the feedback that we received and based on the fact that we concur that it would implement another transition and another change for our students. So foregoing the elementary base redistricting step and going directly to elementary reconfiguration. The recommendation is that we do elementary reconfiguration this fall, September of 26, at Clinton Elementary and Northwood Elementary. At those two schools first. Clinton is our greatest concern and one of the greatest needs for us to explore either redistricting or reconfiguration. The class sizes at Clinton are not class sizes that are acceptable by our standards. And this would allow us to tackle those two schools first for the fall of 26. So come September, Clinton Elementary would be a pre-K to 2 elementary school, and Northwood would be a grade 3 through 5 elementary school. We would be able to focus all of our efforts on doing it well and supporting the students and families in those two schools for the fall of 26. Then in the fall of 27, we would do this same model, but now we would be addressing the West Side schools. So reconfiguring our elementary schools where Allendale and Winchester Potters would now become pre-K to 2 elementary schools, and this building, West Elementary, would become a grade 3 through 5 building. This building, to remind folks, or if they weren't aware, this building was actually designed to be a junior high. It was never designed to hold pre-kindergarten or kindergarten classrooms. And so we deal with challenges of trying to have little students in this building. There are no bathrooms in the classrooms here, as an example, as what you would commonly see in a kindergarten classroom. So having this building be an intermediate school is really smartly using this building for the manner in which it was designed. And then phase 3 and our long-range plan would really look at utilizing our buildings in the greatest extent possible to meet the needs of our community. Winchester Academy, we would be reutilizing that as a school building, with BOCES vacating that building. BOCES does anticipate still needing to lease about 6 to 10 classrooms with us, so that would allow us to maintain students in that building, making it eligible for state aid on any capital improvement projects that we do. But this would also allow us to concentrate our family supports. Right now, our family supports are not concentrated. We have central registration on the campus of East Middle School. We have our clothing closet at the Ebenezer building, and we do not have a family support center. Our vision is to have all of these family support services in one location at the Winchester Academy, which would house a family support center, our clothing closet, central registration, and we have a vision of a Boys and Girls Club at the Winchester Academy. So this would really be a community hub to serve our children and to serve our families. East Elementary would host our central offices. Right now, our central offices are not centralized. Our district offices are actually in 3 different locations. Special education is located in this building. Some of our central offices are located in the Ebenezer building, and some of our central offices are on the campus of East Middle School. By having us take over that space that was the former East Elementary School, it will allow us to centralize all of our district offices into one location and ultimately vacate the Ebenezer building so that we can sell that building. That will alleviate a burden to our taxpayers. We will have one fewer building to maintain, whether it's the electricity or snow plowing, one fewer buildings to maintain, and it is a building that we get no state aid back on, and it is in need of repairs. So all of our central offices would go to the East Middle School campus in the former East Elementary School. And then to solve the capacity issues at West Middle School and to also bring about some enhancements to our educational program, we have a vision to fill in the pools at both West Middle School and East Middle School, and to repurpose that space to have innovative STEM classrooms or STEAM classrooms. That would allow us to relocate the current technology or art rooms to that new space that's being filled in where the pools currently are, and allow us to repurpose those spaces to garner some additional instructional space. With the Board of Education, I've filled them in on kind of the status of swim in schools. Most middle schoolers do whatever they can to avoid swim in phys ed class. We underutilize our pools during the day, and they are a tremendous expense to a school district. The ongoing maintenance of a pool, from heating, filtering, chlorine, and chemicals, to the personnel expense. Whenever you have children in a pool, you need multiple adults that are CPR certified to have eyes on the pool. We are not utilizing our pools during the school day to make it justifiable to invest about $3+ million in each of those pools just to keep them open and functioning. We would maintain our pools at the high school level, and in talking with our community education director, having 2 high school pools will not only meet our needs for our athletic program, but it will also meet the needs that we have of our community education program. We do have learn to swim programs and things of that nature that are enjoyed by our community, and we don't want to discontinue that. We will be able to support those programs by consolidating and going down to 2 pools, one at each of our high schools. That, of course, will be dependent on voter support of that plan. In order for us to repurpose our pools and have them be additional instructional space, we will be putting that out to voters this spring in a capital improvement project in May. And so if this plan is a plan that the community supports as a long-term plan for our school district, I hope that the community will come out and show their support of that plan. This is our vision, not only to solve the elementary redistricting and capacity issues that we have at Allendale, at Clinton, and at West Mill, but really is a comprehensive plan that looks at the use of our facilities on a long-term basis. So with that, just want to summarize some of the benefits of this revised plan. It is first and foremost responsive to stakeholder feedback. If nothing else, I hope the community sees with full transparency that our minds were not made up on this back in May. We have worked, reworked, and reworked again this plan based on the feedback that we got to really try to develop a plan that is something that we believe is reflective of the values of this community. It keeps students with their peers and classmates rather than a neighborhood being dislocated to a different location. It keeps peers together. Students will be together kindergarten through 5th grade, and they will transition from that primary school, the pre-K to 2 building, to the 3 to 5 building together, only to go on to middle school together. So we will really have students cohorted in a large group of peers from kindergarten all the way through high school. It avoids children attending, potentially multiple different elementary schools and having those transitions in the elementary years. This plan and the rollout of the plan, with phase 1 being Northwood and Clinton in the fall of 26, and then our West Side elementary schools in the fall of 27, really allows us to focus our support to do it well and do it right at only 2 to 3 schools at a time. It'll allow us to really focus on transitional supports for our students and our faculty and staff. And there's a lot of logistical things that we will need to work through. It allows us the time and the resources to be able to make the furniture and equipment moves, to be able to have Clinton be a primary school and Northwood to be an intermediate school. The furniture and equipment we have in a kindergarten classroom, think little tables, little chairs, is a lot different than the furniture and equipment that we have in a 5th grade classroom. So this summer, we are going to have a lot of those logistical moves to make so that the instructional space is developmentally appropriate for the students that are going to be entering it. We'll be able to focus that support at Northwood and Clinton this summer, and then the summer of 27, give that same care and focus at Allendale, Winchester Potters, and West Elementary. And then lastly, transportation and transportation logistics. We have done some preliminary work on transportation because we wanted to ensure that the plan that we were presenting tonight was a feasible and viable plan from a transportation perspective, which it is. But we also anticipate some transportation efficiencies. One thing that I'll note here is that if a family has a student in a primary building and an intermediate building, so let's say you've got a 1st grader at Clinton and a 4th grader at Northwood, we were sensitive to families and the needs of families. We didn't want a bus going through a neighborhood 2 times for elementary kids. That would be inefficient. What will happen and what we envision in the model is the bus will go through the neighborhood 1 time, picking up the kindergarten through 5th grade students, and then I'll show you a draft of what we've put together of what that could look like for potential pickup and drop-off times. Some limitations of this revised plan. I wish I could say that there is a perfect plan that doesn't have limitations. If there was, I'm sure this committee would have found it 3 years ago. But some of the limitations that we do need to realize is that this will mean that some of our families will have children in 2 different elementary schools. They may have a child in kindergarten in one building and in 3rd grade in another building. That may not be preferred by some of our families, but I think the benefits that we saw on the previous slide outweigh that limitation. And it does add a transition for our students, yet they're not transitioning away from their peers. Their peer group is staying together. They will all move together to the intermediate school and then ultimately on to the middle school. So from here, should the Board of Education vote to adopt the plan tonight as we're recommending it, our next steps are immediately to shift gears from what is the plan and how will this be solved to now we have the plan and we're going to get to work on the logistical details to ensure that it is smoothly rolled out come September of 26. We intend to communicate the finalized plan to our faculty, staff, and to our families so everyone knows what is on the horizon. We will work with our parent-teacher organizations and principals and all stakeholders to ensure that any students who are going through a transition to a new school will be supported through that with things on the horizon like open houses and meet and greets. And we'll focus on that support specifically at Northwood and Clinton in the upcoming year, and then in the following year being able to focus that support at Allendale, Westell, and Winchester Potters. We will also finalize the bus routing plan. A preliminary plan was done to ensure that this is feasible, and it is feasible. But now we need to look at, it was a model done with our current students. Of course, our fifth graders will be exiting. We have a new cohort of kindergartners, and we will be revising that routing with the students that will be impacted by this come September of 26. We will also need to finalize the Northwood and Clinton start and end times. It's anticipated that we will go from having 4 tiers on the east side to a staggered start at Tier 3 of approximately 10 to potentially 15 minutes apart. So right now, to summarize for those who may not be familiar, we have a 4-tier bus model. Tier 1 is our high school bus run. That is the earliest run of the day. Tier 2 is our middle school bus run for our middle school students. Tier 3 is 3 of our elementary schools. So we have 3 elementary schools that have an earlier start time. Tier 4 are our 2 late elementary schools. So moving from those traditional 4-tier start times to allow for that new plan on the east side at Northwood and Clinton. And then, of course, we have some logistical details with staffing assignments. Staff may be shifting grade levels, or potentially, if they prefer and would like to transfer to a different building, going through that process to account for any of our staffing shifts. And then lastly, the plan to develop all of the movement of furniture, equipment, and teaching materials. What we have and what we anticipate in a primary library that would have an abundance of picture books will be different than what we anticipate in an intermediate library. So the time to be able to develop a plan for all of those logistical details so that each school developmentally reflects the age of their students. I want to share with you an example, and I underscore example. In no way, shape, or form is this finalized, but I wanted you to see an example of what start and end time could look like. As I mentioned, right now we have Tier 3 and Tier 4 at the elementary level, and those tiers are about 30 minutes difference in start and end time. In this model, we would have a bus go through a neighborhood and pick up all K-5 students. The bus would stop first at Clinton Elementary and drop off the kindergarten, first, and second grade students. The older students would stay on the bus and continue on to Northwood Elementary. We anticipate Northwood Elementary would start potentially 10 to 15 minutes later than Clinton Elementary. In the afternoon, it would be the reverse of that. The bus would first pick up at Clinton Elementary. They would have the earlier end time of their student day, and then the bus would go on to Northwood Elementary to pick up grade 3 through 5 students. So a bus is going through the neighborhood one time, as opposed to sending out a primary bus and an intermediate bus. The bus goes through the neighborhood one time, so a family that has kindergarten through 5th grade students, all of their children can be on the bus together, and we would have staggered drop-offs at those 2 schools. This is, again, an example of what that model could look like. We have additional work to do to finalize what the exact start and end times would be, which is why I've underscored it is an example, just so that you can conceptualize the model and what that would look like. And we have more work to do before finalizing that. And of course, working with our stakeholders, our teachers, our parents, and communicating out any of those changes when it comes to start and end time. So that is the revised recommendation. I will put it up on the screen again so that you can reference that, but I would like to simply at this point allow the board to give any feedback or ask any questions that you have regarding the revised plan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone want to start? Got some questions? Yeah. Zach, start with you.
Is there anything parents or families can do or be proactive, if they are affected by this redistricting?
My best and first advice is to talk positively to your children about this. If your children see that you as parents are upset, scared, or concerned about this plan, that will be felt by your child. This is an opportunity for them to have a new cohort of peers that they will be staying with through high school. The way in which we as adults talk about this will directly impact the way our children feel about this change. And if we are excited and eager about what's on the horizon and an opportunity to meet new friends, that will be impacted by our students. So I think that's my first piece of advice is when you talk with your child about this, please be mindful that the way in which we embrace this will be directly how our kids embrace this. Second, our schools are beautiful hubs of the community. Go to and visit a school, go to their Christmas concert, go to the playground. It's an opportunity for you to start to get children familiar with the school buildings prior to the change that's either coming this September or next September. And when we have those opportunities like meet and greets, open house, scavenger hunts, I would encourage you, the best that your schedule allows you to be actively involved in that and to take advantage of those opportunities. We will certainly make those opportunities available to help support students through that transition.
Good. Anyone else?
Just on that, Lisa, I think you were saying that for students, or I should say more, so for parents who can't do that in the evening because they're working, is there going to be a time during the day that students will have a field trip so that every student has the opportunity, and that if their parents are working and they don't have transportation in the evening, that they would get that exposure?
We can certainly consider that. What I'd like to do to help develop those plans is pull together our parent-teacher organizations, teachers and principals, to look at what can we do, such as field trips for students who may not be able to come during an evening. But I think that's a great suggestion and one that I'd like for us to explore.
I'll piggyback on that. I'm assuming there's almost going to be like a transition team for this. Is that the kind of concept there?
So I've already started. We have 2 meetings on the calendar already. One with the building principals, the other where we're pulling in some of our teammates who will help with the logistics on this, like our director of facilities, our director of transportation. We anticipate having subgroups that will be tasked with all of the logistical details and planning. For example, transportation and a subgroup on that, and the director of facilities around the actual physical moves of any furniture and equipment. And one of those subgroups will be the social emotional transitional supports for students, because that's more important than moving desks and chairs, is ensuring that our students are well prepared for this transition. And I think some of this is going to be a mindset shift. Forever, we've been doing kindergarten orientation. Well, now we will likely have a 3rd grade orientation because our students will be going off to 3rd grade in a new school, and we will need to think of that in a different way as a transitional year, just as we think of 6th grade orientation and freshman orientation. So I think some of this is going to be a mindset shift for us, but ensuring that we have a subgroup for transitional supports and the social emotional support for students.
Excellent. And again, if this is already being developed, I'm not looking to micromanage the process. Is there a way what I'm going to get, and I'm sure what I've already gotten and everyone else is going to get is, well, what about this? Well, what about this? What if this? Questions that kind of, I don't want to imply are individualized per parent, but every parent that is going to be involved in this is going to be thinking about, well, with their kid, what about this? What about, is there maybe similar to where we used to have, like, you can email the board if you have questions, so we can compile and we see if there's similar questions developing, maybe we can address it right on a website instead of like every parent calling the principal or calling you or like just a chance to get their questions out, and then we can kind of get the answers as we can come up with them. A way to funnel them into one spot. Is there going to be an opportunity like that?
Sure. We have an email account established that we've been using throughout this process to accept questions. And from that email, when we receive questions, if they were very individualized questions, we would respond to that individual. If it was a more generalized question that we thought might be beneficial for everyone to hear not only the question but the response, we developed frequently asked questions and we pushed out an FAQ. In May or June, we had the FAQ that went out based on the number of questions. When we would get repetitive questions, we thought, okay, this is something that we need to clarify because more than one person has a similar question. And we can certainly do that again and develop an FAQ if we're getting a pattern of questions. But you're right, there will be, particularly for our children with special needs or that are in a special class, there may be parents who have very individualized questions, and we want to help support them with that as well.
So just to reiterate, this reconfiguration plan, beginning with Clinton and Northwood, would not only alleviate the class size burden, but also allow for adequate space for related service providers, correct?
That is correct. The building capacity that we looked at not only looked at classrooms, what I'll call traditional classrooms, but also all of the space needed for interventionists, so things like AIS services, reading specialists, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech services. All of those interventionists and related services were accounted for when we looked at building capacity.
Dr. Krueger, I just had a couple more questions. It also allowed, to Sarah's point, some space for special education classes in those buildings.
That is correct. Right now, our special education classes, as I think the board is aware, have not been at the forefront of planning that we've done. Self-contained classes specifically have been placed wherever there's capacity out of that need. As an example, this building, West Elementary, currently has 9 self-contained classes. That is a lot for a building when you account for the supports that those students need, the supports that they need for their program, the number of teacher aides that are needed to support a program or related services. Having 9 self-contained classes in one building does put a unique strain on a building. This is going to allow us to not simply look at it as where do we have space, and that's where the class goes, but instead look at grouping classes together in a manner that's best for the students and for the program, whether that's our 161 classes, our 181, or our 112-1. So there will be the space to be able to do that in our elementary schools, and Jackie Fowler and Joelle Burke have put together preliminary plans on a continuum of services that utilizes our elementary schools, but also is much more equitable in how many classes and what programs are in each of our schools. And it has not been equitable in recent years. We've had some buildings with few to no special classes and other buildings with an abundance of special classes.
Thank you. And I had just one last question. Can you just clarify, because this was very detailed and wonderful, so just for everyone to understand what the board is voting on tonight, what is going to the community for vote in May, and then also looking at the long-range plan with transportation on there, because I believe that is what's going to the vote in May as well for long-range. Should something come available before 29, would that be able to be taken advantage of? So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of what the board is voting on tonight, plus what is going to the community in May.
Great point of clarity. The board tonight is simply voting on the redistricting/reconfiguration plan. So focusing on what's presented here, phase 1 and phase 2. It's really reconfiguring our elementary schools and creating pre-K to 2, 3 to 5 schools. The other phases, the board is not taking action on tonight, and that would be part of our long-range facilities plan. One aspect of that plan is a capital improvement project this May that we anticipate. We will be bringing our architects, Young and Wright, and campus construction to present at our December 9th board meeting. The scope of the next capital improvement project is really starting to come into clarity. And one aspect of that capital improvement project is to fill in the pools at the middle school, at both middle schools, so that we can repurpose those pools and claim some additional instructional space. In terms of the transportation department, that we do not have a definitive timeline for. If we find a property that meets our needs, it certainly could happen sooner than 2029, but in our long-range plan, ensuring that we have adequate space to be able to accommodate our desire to increase our fleet of buses.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. I know staff and faculty are going to have questions that are specific to their building with shifts, changes, even, east with having all of central office on that campus, and what is that going to look like? Are there going to be opportunities for staff and faculty to ask those questions? Because I know many parents are going to go to the teachers first to start asking things. I just want to make sure they're prepared. Or, when you're at an event and you know someone who kind of runs the building, you're going to be asking those questions of them too.
Our principals are amazing. Mrs. McCartan, the principal of Clinton Elementary, has a faculty meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Mrs. Ferry, the principal of Northwood Elementary, has a faculty meeting scheduled for Thursday. So those buildings that are going to be most impacted by this in the immediate future have faculty meetings set up, because I anticipate teachers may have questions around, how will this work? If I prefer to stay at this building, or if I prefer to teach a particular grade level. And we have contractual language around that dictates how we go about assigning staff and assigning them to a grade level, as an example. But nonetheless, I'm sure there will be questions around that. So we are starting with those 2 schools and their faculty meetings and communications at those buildings, and then taking time to share those communications at other buildings that are either less impacted or not impacted come fall of 26, where we have some more time for those communications.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would say my only concern is for the long-range plan. I thought we had come to the decision that we were going to work towards the One West Seneca, where we were combining both east and west. And by no means do I want to say that I think anything was rushed, because I know how much time we spent last year alone, and then, previous boards, how much time they invested into it. But it was always the same, like utilizing the same buildings for the same exact reason. So elementary was always just, those were the elementary buildings. So never once did a discussion come up of converting one of the high schools into an elementary building, and seeing how that would possibly fit into the plan, and if it could, and how many kids we could put there. And then utilizing possibly the middle schools as an intermediate, and then whatever the other high school was is maybe the 10-12 or the 10-12 would probably make the most sense. Because to me, we have so much real estate, and the way we configure it right now, it works, but there's probably ways we could be much more strategic with it and not need as much real estate, which then is going to lower the cost of the district. And I just wish we could have spent, if I knew we were going to be adding the transitions like the K2, 3, 5, because I know we were trying to stay away from more transitions for these kids. I wish we would have spent a little bit more time and maybe exploring that type of option. It may not even be possible, may not work, but I think that would have been beneficial if we could have brought the entire district together and had them together the entire time they're in school.
Okay. That is feedback that we didn't get following the June presentation, so that was not something that was explored at that time. I think we had a group that did previously present. The redistricting committee before I came to the district presented the concept of one high school and a junior high, I'll call it, and a senior high model of grades 8, 9 in one of the high schools and 10, 12 in one of the high schools. And there was some tremendous feedback from the community. I would say if that is something that's desired by the board to want to revisit high school configuration, that would be the will of the board to be able to do that. Our charge as a committee and what I believe the board had asked us to do first and foremost was to solve the elementary capacity issues, which this plan does. If down the road we want to still look at and revisit the utilization of our high schools, there's nothing that would prevent us from doing so. I think whether it's exploring specialized high schools, magnet high schools, if the board wants to revisit that concept of an 8-9 building and a 10-12 building, we certainly could explore that, but I hope it would not prevent us from delaying a decision tonight, because there is the greatest sense of urgency around elementary capacity and class size issues, particularly at Clinton and Allendale. But I guess I would entertain, feedback from the rest of the board if that is something that down the road the board would like us to revisit. You're not voting on that tonight. That right-hand column in terms of a long-range plan and 2029 and beyond is not anything that the board is voting on. But if that is something that the board wants to explore, we certainly can. My request is allow us to have our energy and attention right now on the elementary and middle school configurations to do that really well. And then if down the road we want to explore the high schools, we certainly could. In terms of real estate and us being sensitive to taxpayers and the number of buildings and properties that we have, our plan to vacate the Ebenezer building will reduce the burden on taxpayers. It will be one less building for us to heat, maintain, a building that we don't get state aid back. So us moving out of the Ebenezer building, I really do believe is financially responsible, consolidating the footprint that we have and bringing us to a building where there's an abundance of space. But if that's something that the board would like us to visit down the road, we certainly can do that.
Yeah, I don't want you to think I am opposed to what's being proposed tonight. I just feel long-term, the realization is, at East, I believe we're under 800 now students. West is floating maybe around 1,000. And in Tony's projections Tony Day, when he did his, it just continues to decrease. So, when you explain that to the taxpayers, if they don't understand it, shame on them. It's just you're just dumping all this money into buildings that keep having less and less students in there. When do you finally get to a breaking point? So I'm not saying down the road we might not get more families having more kids, but it just does not seem like that's a trend anymore. And you have to look long term. I'm not saying we have to start this tomorrow. It's just because the more we invest into these buildings, then we end up with these big bonds on them for 15 years, and then we end up being stuck in that building for another 15 years, or we eat the cost. So if it's something that is possible and it's something we can move towards, I think it's something that's worth investing time into.
Sure. I think we have some time to consider that, though, because the population is supposed to stay fairly consistent for the 5 and 10-year projections. It's after that point that they kind of feel like we're going to start to decline, so we would have time to do that within that 5 to 10 year mark if we wanted to
Well, even
discuss it.
Tony's 3-year outlook had dropped. It was a considerable number moving forward. So,
If I may, Dr. Krueger, when she came in, wanted to make West Seneca a community where people wanted to come. So I did reach out to a few of our town council members to ask where we were with opportunities for more families to come in. And just from being on the board and working with the state, we don't realize, is there affordable housing in our community? Are there daycares that bring in families? So when I spoke with the town council, the thing that was pointed out was that most of the single-family homes are by seniors. So in that 5 or 10 year plan, those seniors are going to move out, And now West Seneca's going to be in a position, I think, where you're going to have young families want to move in. So I think we're going to put ourselves in a good position to make West Seneca, once again, the place that people want to come.
So the last development we put in, and I can't remember which one it was approximately 200 houses, and they were expecting all these families to move in with all these kids, and I think it was a total of 40 kids total out of 200 houses.
Well, you never know, but the fact is, there's been a big housing crunch, and there's nowhere for families to go, so they're renting.
Turn it around quick, so.
Well, it may, but I think all these seniors are going to be moving out and moving on from their current homes. And just to comment on your comment about the senior high school becoming for elementary, they're not built for elementary students. There's no way configuration-wise, square footage-wise, you might fit them all, but there's no way you're putting small children in a vast, like even this building isn't meant for them. So I just don't think it's not going to work.
In the classrooms, you made it work, so.
Well, it sounds to me like we want to have a great conversation on the next level. Can we move it to?
I'm ready, let's go.
Another, you want to have it now?
No, I meant like,
Can
let's get this.
Can we
yeah.
regroup on this, and then we can probably, I'm going to guess, give us a couple of months to settle in, and we can have a whole work session, and we can add part of it to it?
Oh, no, I just wanted to put my 2 cents
No,
in.
I love your, they're not making pennies anymore, so how about a nickel? But, I definitely, I don't want to debate whether the high schools will hold kids or not now, but we definitely can continue that at a work session or another board meeting, if that's cool. Okay, good. Nickel, put your nickel in.
Are there any other questions?
Anyone else on anything? I want to throw out there, though, you mentioned Ebenezer and selling it. That puts a property back on the tax rolls. I think that's a positive, too. I mean, it's not going to necessarily make or break the town, but it's a pretty big chunk of land, and if someone buys it, they're probably not going to be another school district. So it'll be back on the tax rolls, hopefully.
Right.
That's a positive.
And I don't want this taken out of context. We don't anticipate closing any schools in the near future, but there is a pathway to do this should the numbers dictate that. What we will have on the west side are 2 pre-K to 2 and a 3 to 5 school. If the numbers dwindled, Allendale is the smallest elementary school with the smallest footprint. There could be a future where there is 1 3 to 5 school and 1 pre-K to 2 school on the west side. So there are pathways and options if the numbers dictated that, but right now that's not the case. That's not the case in the foreseeable future. Utilizing our spaces and the configurations the way in which they are is certainly something that I think the redistricting committee and our stakeholder feedback was pretty resoundingly loud on those fronts.
Anything else? Okay.
If I can just take a moment, I really want to recognize the Board of Education for their dedication to this process, and I do hope that the community sees that this was not a decision that was made and done back in May or June or 3 men in a room who made a decision. This has been years of work with a committee, stakeholder feedback gathered at 5 different points through surveys and also through 2 different community forums that we held. And each of these iterations has been evolved and tweaked based on the feedback that we received. So I think that's reflective of a leadership team that really does care about stakeholder feedback and wants to do what's right for the community and what the community values, but equally a Board of Education that takes their oath as board members to represent the voice of the community. So this has been a long time to get to this point where the board is actually making a decision, and I just wanted to recognize again the efforts of the board and the efforts of the redistricting committee. Thank you.